Hello students, hope you all are healthy and not just physically but also mentally, emotionally and spiritually. With all the things that you have learned in this class on stress management, I think you are much more well equipped than the general public when it comes to managing stress. But it is also important to remember that we need to practice using those tools in order for us to be able to manage our stress better. Just having those tools, just being equipped with a lot of tools does not automatically make us skilled in stress management. For instance, I have the piano here. Just having the piano at home, owning the piano will not make me a great pianist. I will have to practice it on a regular basis, on a daily basis. I need to invest time into using the piano in order for me to become a better musician, in order for me to become better at playing the piano. The same thing applies when it comes to stress management. So the tool that I'm going to provide you today is, of course, meditation. It's a very effective tool. There's a lot of research papers that have been published on meditation over the last 2-3 decades, all providing strong evidence for it to be working when it comes to stress management. And not just stress management. Meditation has a whole host of other benefits, which we will briefly enumerate later on. But meditation is also something that people talk about a lot. They don't practice it enough. That is the reason I was talking about not just having the tools, but using those tools, mastering those tools. If I want to become a strong person, I actually have to do those pull-ups and push-ups. Just knowing how to do the pull-ups and push-ups and not practicing those pull-ups and push-ups on a daily basis will not make me strong. So the same thing applies to meditation as well. So today I'm going to go over the science of some of the foundational meditation practices so that you gain a good understanding of how it works and why it works. Not just listing the list of results of showing that it works, but you need to understand how it works and why it works. So we will talk about a little bit about the science of meditation, and I will teach you one specific method of meditation. Later on in the semester, I may teach you a couple more, but today I will teach you one method of meditation that I hope you will practice, especially during these times when you are locked up at home for the because of the coronavirus outbreak. Now, before I talk specifically about meditation, we will do a quick overview of some of the important theories that we have learned in our class, so that you can make the necessary connection between those theories and the technique of meditation. We learned several theories of emotion in our class. Ultimately, all those theories told us that our thoughts, our emotions, and our behaviors, they are intricately connected with each other. They affect each other. For instance, James-Lange's theory told us that our behaviors have a strong impact on our emotions. When we see a bear, we start running, our heart starts pounding, we are breathing heavily, and that behavior ultimately causes us to feel the emotion of fear. Now that seemed a little odd way of thinking about the origin of emotions, or how we experience emotions. But it turned out that there was evidence in support of James-Lange's theory. For instance, you will remember this study that showed how research participants held the pencil had an impact on how happy or unhappy they were. If the participants held the pencil in their teeth, that simulated the smile, they experienced more pleasant emotions. Whereas when they held the pencil in their lips that simulated the pout, they experienced less of those positive emotions. So, in other words, the behavior of how you hold the pencil was impacting the emotions that people were experiencing. Similarly, we found support for James-Lange's theory also in Amy Curry's work, where participants who were engaging in the high power poses were feeling more powerful compared to those who are engaging in low power poses. Similarly, we also discussed few studies on the yoga poses. In this study, for instance, participants, when they engaged in the cobra pose or the bhujangasana, elevated their levels of testosterone or the dominance hormone and had their cortisol levels decreased, the stress hormone levels decreasing. So all these studies provide evidence of our behaviors impacting our emotions. So that gives us certain ideas about how then we can manage stress. If we engage in more positive behaviors, we will experience more positive emotions. If we do not engage in enough of those positive behaviors, or if we engage in less positive behaviors or negative behaviors like slouching and not smiling, for instance, that will actually make us more unhappy. So that is one way of managing stress that we talked about. Another important theory that we learned in the class was the Cannon-Bart's theory. The theory told us that threatening objects or threatening animals, threatening stimulus can directly cause the emotion of fear. We don't necessarily have to run or engage in a certain behavior in order to feel the emotion. We can directly feel the emotion. In fact, the emotion makes us run, is what Cannon and Bart argued. And we find a lot of support for Cannon-Bart's theory. Their own experiments that demonstrated sham rage, for instance, the Kluver-Bucy syndrome, Downer's studies on amygdala lesions, all these studies provided strong support for Cannon-Bart's theory. I'm not going through all these studies in detail because we have already studied those experiments and studies. But ultimately, we learned about this fear circuit through Cannon-Bart's model, that any threatening external stimulus, when we see it or when we experience it through whatever means, that information goes to our thalamus first and then to the limbic system, more specifically amygdala, but other parts of the limbic system are involved as well. That ultimately create the fear or anxiety response, the negative emotions response. So that was the fear circuit that we learned about. Now, while this makes a lot of sense, while there is a lot of evidence in favor of Cannon-Bart's theory, what implications does it have with respect to how then we manage our emotions, the negative emotions? How can we minimize those negative emotions? We do that by recognizing another circuit that exists. So this is the circuitry that goes from thalamus to the prefrontal cortex back to the amygdala. So that circuit is much slower path, but it is much more accurate path, right? So that circuitry, if it is strengthened, then we will experience more positive emotions and less negative emotions. We will be much more in control of our emotions because this circuitry that goes from the thalamus to the prefrontal cortex back to the limbic system, that circuitry is our conscious thought process. The prefrontal cortex, remember, it is the executive center of our brain. So through conscious thought process, we can have greater control over our emotions. So this is something that we have already learned. But we also have a problem. Our conscious thought process is often not working in our favor. We often have a lot of negative thoughts. So, our conscious thought process, while if it is positive, can minimize the negative emotions and enhance the positive emotions. If those conscious thoughts that we have, well, conscious or subconscious, if the thoughts that we have, if they tend to be very negative, then obviously we will experience a lot of negative emotions. So our thoughts, which we take so much pride for, that we are the species that have most developed thinking ability, we take so much of pride for, can then ultimately work to our detriment. So our thoughts themselves can create a lot of stress within us. I don't necessarily have to see a bear. If I imagine a scary bear, that itself can cause me to feel emotions, negative emotions. I can imagine anything, that the world is going to come to an end and then I will be distressed. Those thoughts itself can cause a lot of distress. For us to not feel stressed, then we need to have control over our thoughts. If we are thinking a lot of negative thoughts, we will be experiencing a lot of distress. So, how do we do that? People will typically advise, don't engage in those negative thoughts. Don't worry. But does that work? When people tell you not to worry, you think, well, I can't help it. I just can't help it. Those negative thoughts are there. I can't make them go away. The best way to think about it is, if I ask you, don't think about a white bear for the next 1 minute. Think about anything in the world, but not a white bear. Okay, that's your task. We know this is not going to work, right? In fact, our thoughts automatically come to the white bear. So this is the problem. We have no control over our thoughts. And that is the biggest cause of stress in our lives. The advice, don't worry, maybe the advice with good intention, but typically it doesn't work because people don't have control over their thoughts. They automatically feel worried. So this brings us to the idea of meditation. Meditation is essentially a technique that helps you gain control over your thoughts. To put it in perspective, if we discuss this in context of the three main regions of the brain, meditation is about strengthening the neocortex. We know that there are three main regions of the brain. We have the hindbrain that controls the vital organs so that we don't die. Then we have the limbic system that is responsible for the experience of emotions, negative emotions, positive emotions. It essentially detects danger in the environment. And then we have the neocortex, which is the conscious part of our brain. It's responsible for logical thinking, creative thinking. Limbic system sometimes get unfairly blamed for the experience of stress. But we need to realize that if our limbic system wasn't functioning efficiently and effectively, we would all be dead. It is good that the limbic system detects danger on a timely basis so that then we take necessary actions to further our survival. Remember the Kluver-Bucy syndrome, for instance, where those animals that had lesions in their amygdala were having no fear at all. They would pick up venomous snakes that would actually kill them. So that's a problem. We don't want that to happen. The problem happens when the limbic system goes on an overdrive. The analogy that I can think about would be like your immune system going against you. Your immune system is so much on an overdrive that it starts attacking its own cells. That's what happens in extremely stressful situations, for instance, or when we get extremely stressed. We know from a very rational point of view that we have no logical valid reason to feel stressed, yet we do, and we feel helpless with respect to our emotions. We seem to have no control over our thoughts that influence our emotions as well. So meditation helps strengthen the connections in the neocortical region and the connections between the neocortex and the limbic system as well, so that our conscious awareness, our logical thinking, our willpower is strengthened, so that our conscious part of us is the master and not the slave. With that foundational knowledge, I think I will stop the video here. I don't want the video to be too long. I will create a second part of the video where I will discuss the specifics of the meditation process. Thank you.